She and my father have just gotten into a disagreement about money, and she's like gripping the steering wheel and she says, Eleanor, money is power. Make sure that you always make your own.
From Six Story, I'm your producer, Diana Hong, and you're listening to Rev Up Your Potential with Hilda Gann, the show where we talk with entrepreneurs in Toronto about the stories behind their success and the lessons they've learned along the way. And now your host, Hilda Gann.
Hello, everybody. Hilda Gann, Rev Up Your Potential. And today's guest is Eleanor Beaton, the founder of SafiMedia. And I would love to welcome her to my studio. Hi, Eleanor.
Hello, Hilda. Oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to be here with you.
And I'm just looking forward to our conversation about your journey and how you came to be a top leading person that's running SafiMedia today. So maybe for those who don't know you, Eleanor, could you tell a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I am a writer. I'm a business coach. I'm a CEO. I'm a podcast host myself. And ultimately, I'm the founder of SafiMedia. So SafiMedia is a coaching company. We're on a mission to double the number of women entrepreneurs who scale past 7 figures in annual revenue. And we do that through education and coaching. And we really feel that women entrepreneurs are the key to advancing gender equity worldwide. So we're really focused on specifically working with women who are in those consulting businesses. They are overworked consultants, overworked service providers, and really laying out excellent tools and stories and resources to help those women entrepreneurs scale past $1 million in revenue.
Such an important piece of work to help women who really want to be bold and be brave and be out there in the world, and you are a catalyst to support them and help them. So I'm pleased and excited to have us share more about who you are. So maybe we can take it back to what are things that you can share with us that really shaped you deciding to start a business. Tell us a little bit about your childhood, your schooling that created the Eleanor Beaton we know today.
Right. So 2 things. One, I think I was raised seeing a pent up desire for economic empowerment from my mom. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. And I also was raised in an environment where freedom and autonomy were very heavily prized. So we immigrated to Canada when I was a kid. My father was an economics professor from Wales. My mother, she was originally a teacher, actually. She was initially, when they first got together, she was the main breadwinner. She's from the Fiji Islands. And so they immigrated to Canada because my dad got a job teaching at Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. So we come over here. My mother's in a completely new and different culture. And she decides that she feels more comfortable raising me and then my sister and brother, through our childhood. That's where she felt more comfortable rather than being in the workforce. The challenge with that is that she became completely economically dependent on my dad. And, they worked it out most of the time, but I can have a vivid memory. I'm about 15 years old. She's driving me to basketball practice. She and my father have just gotten into a disagreement about money, and she's like gripping the steering wheel. And she says, Eleanor, money is power. Make sure that you always make your own.
Wow.
So right. And that was just this burning feeling in me that I always wanted to have my own economic power, to be able to make my own decisions, to have my own back all the time. It wasn't sort of not trusting people. It was more just that was an important thing for me. And on the corresponding side, my father, he valued freedom. So he was a prof. He got tenured very young. He was always home at 4:00. He was super focused and disciplined in how he did things. So we grew up in an environment where being the queen or king of your own time was critical, having plenty of time to do things that are important to you. I saw that entrepreneurship was going to be the career that fulfilled both of those sort of values, even though I never considered entrepreneurship as a career until I was in my early 20s and ultimately met my husband. I didn't know any entrepreneurs, you know? So that's kind of my story and how I started the business and why why it was so important for me to become an entrepreneur, even though I didn't even know they existed. Like I never thought of that as a career.
Because both your parents were academics, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of sense of stability in that. And yet these little life stories you're saying really connect with who I know is Eleanor today. So I get that. I'm hearing the light bulbs clicking. But again, you don't know you're going to be an entrepreneur, but these are the stepping stones. These are the blocks that really get you going. What did you do prior to actually, taking that leap?
Yeah. So I started my career in public relations and advertising. And it was an experience of being close to being right on the dime, like right in the Dharma, but sort of parallel to it, but not right on it. And I say parallel because I just have a real passion. I think the ability to effectively communicate, to be able to paint the picture of who you are, what you do, where you're going is so important for entrepreneurs. So that's really where I started in marketing. And of course, marketing is really important for entrepreneurs. So I started in public relations and advertising, and that was excellent training. But there was something I felt was missing. And ultimately for me, the part that was missing was an ability to be creative the way that I wanted to be creative. So I go back to journalism school and I become a journalist. And again, there's so much I loved about it, but it wasn't quite on the dime, quite in, there in terms of what I wanted to do. The other thing is that at that time, journalism was beginning its sort of long, slow descent. So we don't have the type of journalism opportunities that we did, that was starting to happen. So that was where I started my career, and then ultimately made the decision to start my first business, which was a consulting company.
What was that? Do you want to share that consulting company with us?
Sure. Do you want me to blow you away with the amazing first name that I chose for it? It was called Wise Words Communications. That's what it was called. Now I look back, I'm like, I am so embarrassed. So I just want everybody to know that was my awful name. Cheesy, so cheesy. So now I feel like I can, gently, lovingly tease clients when they come up with cheesy names because I'm the queen of coming up with brutally cheesy names. So listen, that first business, and it was accidental really because I was working as a journalist and I didn't like someone else telling me when I had to be somewhere at a certain time and place. And so my husband suggested that maybe I try starting my own business. And this whole concept blew me away. I mean, I was just shocked. You mean I can start my own business doing with a skill set that I have? So I started the company, and really we provided communications services to companies and nonprofits. And that was everything from really helping them create and publish and talk about annual reports. It started there, and it really evolved into developing communications, internal and external communications for companies, and helping, people who are in trouble with the media, handle crisis communications. It really evolved because I ran that company from 2003 to 2014, all through when my kids were being born, when I was just growing essentially. And so that was my initial company.
Did you actually evolve into it? Like, were you working and kind of doing a bit of consulting? And
no, I don't do anything that way. You know this. I just went into it.
They don't know this. I'm helping the storyline here. No. But I think what I want to do is, so you went for it. So you sort of said, until I met my husband, I didn't know there were entrepreneurs. So was he an entrepreneur at that time?
No, he wasn't. He grew up on a farm. So his parents were farmers, which is, they were business owners. A farm is a not so small business sometimes. And so
Yep.
I think that was my exposure to another type of autonomy and independence. And, many of his siblings are entrepreneurs. And so that was sort of that first exposure really to this idea that you can create something out of nothing. You can create your own economy, and it is possible, totally possible, if you're willing to grow personally, to put in the work, and to learn, along the way and be a fast learner.
So what made you decide to start this wise words communication business?
Wise words communication.
I got to make sure you remember your roots here.
Exactly. I know. Why did I decide to start? This was another conversation with my mom, actually. So this conversation happened. So I went to the University of Toronto, and I can remember it was close to my graduation, and she came and stayed with me in my apartment in Little Italy. And we used to go for a lot of long walks, going to restaurants, just walking around the city. And so we were talking about what I was going to do when I graduated, and what my career plans were going to be. And at the time, I was thinking about maybe studying the LSATs and applying to go to law school. I just didn't know. Maybe doing, my master's and being a prof, just like my dad and grandfather. And she said something interesting to me. She said, Eleanor, one of the hardest things as a woman is that you invest all this time and money and energy into your career, and then you're faced with this difficult choice of potentially having to give it all up or, make compromises. That's just I found that to be really difficult. So remember that she was coming of age at a certain time. Career options were so much more limited for her. But I thought, and I'm so thankful for her, because she helped me start thinking early on about when I want to be a mom, how do I want this to go? Because I know I'm ambitious as hell. So how do I set things up that allow me to have this ambition and do it and do my career in a way that I want to, And so that was, it was ambition and autonomy, those two things together. I didn't know how I was going to put that together. I didn't know how it was going to make it work, but I just kind of had this feeling that when the answer comes to me, I'll see it. Mm-hmm. And so that when my husband first kind of planted that seed of potentially starting my own business, and I started to look around at the women entrepreneurs that I knew, I saw they worked really hard, but I also saw that they had autonomy and control over how they allocated their time, which you have complete control over that in many ways as a business owner. It's a little bit different as an employee, no matter what kind of flex options we have. Yeah. So that's honestly, it was a sort of a practical choice for me at that time.
Okay. And as you were growing up, was that part of your personality, that ambition and that sense of, I have to have control, I have to have the autonomy to go where I want to go, to be what I want to be? Was that a theme, a thread in your childhood and into your adolescence and university days?
Well, ambition I was very competitive. I wanted to be the best. I actually had a massively fixed mindset. So now when I look back, that was like my work in my early 20s, getting out of a fixed mindset into a growth mindset. So I really wanted to be the best. And if I wasn't the best at something, I would make sure that I could be. I was extremely competitive. And I don't think that's necessarily, ideal, but I was very ambitious. I'm not sure that autonomy was as important for me because I was one of those kids who really loved the structure of childhood. Like if you're raised in a supportive family where you have a certain degree of privilege that, your main concern is self-actualizing and reaching your potential. And I know not everybody grows up like this. Mm-hmm. You have these structures. You don't really need autonomy because the structure's all there. It's super supportive. Yeah. The desire for autonomy was something that really emerged in my 20s as I started understanding who I was. And I started realizing that, a lot of my professional success has come from being very curious and continuing to pursue curiosity. And that, and entrepreneurship has given me that ability to build a career around that.
What I like about you is you're a deep thinker. and you are a voracious reader.
Yeah.
and you combine that learning different ideas from people with a deep thinker, and up comes another Vesuvius of great ideas, right? So let's talk about that day when Eleanor decides, okay, that's a good idea. I think I could start a company. You start a company. What made you decide to make that leap from, here I am doing copywriting, doing supporting, writing reports,
Yeah.
And then I said, that's it. I can make this happen. What was that pivotal point that made that leap?
I think two things. And every time that I've gone, made a decision like that. So, the first decision was starting my initial company. The next decision was starting my next company. Yeah. So I think that honestly, it comes down to two things. It's that curiosity and vision. So I have been a dreamer for a lot of my life, really imagining what's possible. What might this look like? And so reading about interesting things and asking myself, why not me? Why don't I try my hand at this? So kind of having that vision for wanting to create something different and unique and extraordinary in its own way. And then also this confidence that comes from, I think I could do that. So trying, the willingness to try it. Yeah, okay, I think I can do that. Keep in mind too, that as a journalist, I specialized in business reporting. And so I was doing a ton of interviews with founders of companies, men primarily, but also women who, built multi-billion dollar companies. So that normalized the idea in many cases of sort of business success. It was like an entrepreneurial MBA, that education.
It's like shadowing, right? You got to shadow these people, see how they think and what they're doing. Yeah, what a great learning experience for a budding entrepreneur.
Right? It was totally a great learning experience. Yeah.
So you make this leap. What was the scariest part of doing that?
Ooh, well, honestly, so initially my first company I started in my early 20s. So I'm going to say there was just it was kind of like dumb luck. So, in your
too
early
young
20s,
to know to be scared, right?
Too young to know to be scared. I had nothing to lose. We moved into our home with a car. We had nothing. We were just new, it was all new, all fresh. So I didn't really have a lot to lose. And I think that's important because I feel as though that's one of the most important things to retain. And every time in my business journey, because there are real threats to business that you have to kind of get in there and solve. And there are also, that's one level of threat. The other thing is what we make of that, and what we make of that usually is a function of the fear of what we're going to lose. Mm-hmm. So when I noticed my initial business, I had zero fear really, because I was young and had never really had major issues or challenges, a couple major challenges, but I'd never had an experience of not being able to rely on myself, and never have actually. And so it was a lot of dumb luck. I wasn't afraid of it really. I would say later on, as I started making changes, they required a little bit more gumption because by this time I had kids. I was a main breadwinner in my family. So really kind of making sure that I had some things lined up and that if I was going to do it, I had dependence and making sure that I could do it for them. But initially, I will say the hardest parts in my business initially were things like having the tough conversations, standing up for myself, learning that it's okay to set boundaries, learning how clear I had to be in how I communicated my boundaries with people, all of those, where sort of the human interactions of where the rubber hits the road in business, those were always, I found, the most challenging experiences. Negotiating contracts. I didn't yet have the underlying sense of self-worth and confidence in my ability to be able to negotiate as strong as I could have.
Yeah, I get that. I think it's so, I do a lot of teaching, and one of the things I bump up against is people, no matter how young or how old, is having those difficult conversations. Whether it's negotiating a contract or talking to an employee and worried about what the other person's going to say. And it's that evolution. It's about building confidence who you are. It's valuing your worth. And, appreciate that you share that with the listeners, because that is a key. And sometimes you have to build that confidence in yourself, and you have to try. You just try a little bit and a little bit.
Exactly.
And I love how you said the first one, there's no fear, right? It reminds me of kids when they're skiing. They're so close to the ground, and there's no fear because they're so close to the ground. They've got nothing to lose. When you're taller or 6 feet tall, which I'm not, but when you're 6 feet tall, there's a lot. When you fall, that's a long way down from the top.
Hard.
Right. So can you share? I mean, you've obviously had a few businesses, or you've scaled your business. Tell us a little bit more about those, particularly when you're making that shift, because you said it was harder as you got more vested in terms of things that were accountable for you, to you. Share some of those.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah. So it was, when my first business, a communication business, I shut it down for two different reasons. And this is why I'm so passionate about this. So another thing that happened was I had a friend, his name was Elliot, and we started our companies at the same time. And we actually worked together a lot. And he built up a company. He was a graphic designer, and he built up his company and he sold it. He was getting tired. He wanted to move on to something different, as did I. And he had built up a company he could sell, and I had not, because I was busy working, taking on all these different projects, trading dollars for hours, caught in that classic consultant's trap. And I was furious. Not inwardly, I was seething when I realized that he had cashed out of his company and I just had to shut mine down. And at that point I had a choice. I could have stuck with it, gotten it ready, but I just did not feel that it was worth it. I was ready to exit that business and start my coaching company. So that was huge to me in terms of the decision to scale. So the consulting business was a lucrative, high, profitable, multi-six-figure company. And it worked for me at a time for when I was running it. But honestly, I realized after the fact that I'm never doing that again. I refuse to build that kind of company again, because here's this classic scenario that is repeated over and over in business, that he had access to mentors. I realized he was having conversations that I was not having. He was having conversations about scalability. He was having conversations about exiting the company. He was having conversations about how do you scale, like all of that kind of thing that I was not having. Yeah. And I was like, well, we're done with that. We're finished. That's not happening again. I will not repeat that mistake twice. And so when I built my coaching company, in the beginning, I built it the same way I built my first consulting business, which was through referrals, word of mouth, doing the work myself. That helped me build a good sort of gut feel for how to do it, what worked, what didn't. But the difference was that once I got to a certain place, and it was where I was, and this happened fairly quickly, I was generating about 6 figures through the coaching. I was like, okay, now we're going to make some changes. And the decision to scale, ironically, it was never about doing more. It was always about doing less and getting more and more focused, because I'd done it the other way, right? I'd done it where I grew by doing more. And this time I was like, no, we're not doing that again. I'm going to grow by doing less.
So what year are we talking about now?
I started my coaching company in 2014.
Okay.
Late 2014 was really where I completely shut down my consulting company and went into coaching. And so it was in 2016 where I made the decision that I was going to, I'd made it earlier, but in 2016 was where I was like, okay, we're going to set this up with this philosophy in place that it is going to grow beyond me. And that's just the way that it's going to be. And so that's when I started continuing to sort of niche and narrow my focus.
So that shift really made you think of, instead of being more of a solopreneur, I'm going to be a CEO.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yep.
Right. Because I had that epiphany when I first started my company. I thought, okay, I want to do like you did, build a business, consult with people, and have that gratification of helping others, in terms of their HR. And then suddenly business was successful. And I suddenly realized I got to start thinking like a CEO. I'm going to have staff. I've got to do all of that, and having had iTrans before that was, I knew what to do. I just never thought I would be doing it when I first said, I'm starting my own company and this is what I'm going to do. So,
but I want to pause there for a moment because this is so interesting. And this is the part, the vast majority of women are starting businesses exactly like what we're talking about, and so much of classic business education doesn't apply to the solo consultant.
Correct.
And to our detriment. And so that many of us will create businesses that provide a decent income, but if you stop, so does the money. And so you think you have all this freedom and independence, but you do not, And so I think my passion is really making sure that women are having these conversations because, to your point, Hilda, I think we're like, these are smart women. We a lot of times we can easily figure out what to do. It's, do we see ourselves in that way? Do we see other women and examples of other women doing this that we can draw inspiration from? And then how are we going to, make that leap in a way that works for us?
And that's so true, because I think a lot of women start the business out of that balancing of worlds, that control, that autonomy, and to be able to still be a mother in the way you want to be a mother, but still have some ability to continue to have that self-worth from a professional perspective. For some of us, that's important to have that balance. And so many will go the route of starting their own business. But again, thinking more from a solopreneur perspective because of time, and having coaching, having groups of women talk about the other aspects of the work of the business, not just the work part, but the business running of a business, to have that CEO mindset, so valuable. And I know myself that I started coaching with you 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And that really got my mind thinking what I wanted to do. At that point, I was doing career, and then I switched to business. But having that kind of group think, to support each other, to inspire each other, to motivate each other, so important that I think women should really learn to take advantage of, for sure.
Well, it also kind of goes with how women respond naturally and how we're wired to respond to stress. So neither of us can lie to anybody and say that running your own business isn't stressful. There's a ton of stress involved, but it's all about, does that stress negatively impact you or not? So some entrepreneurs, and this drives me crazy, will scale back on their ambition because they don't want all the stress. And I'm like, but what would happen if you changed your relationship to the stress so that it didn't impact you in that same way? What would be possible then? So for women, we release hormones, we release the tend and befriend. So our response to stress is not the male response, which is to isolate. Our response to stress is to congregate. And so it's, how do you congregate? And I don't know if people listening, and I know your audience are men and women, but one of the things that I always found challenging is, if you're an entrepreneur, you are all in. And so sometimes it can be a little challenging to talk with civilians about, i.e.
even family
non-entrepreneurs.
civilians,
That's
even
right.
family civilians,
Right? Sometimes especially family civilians. Civilians about what you're experiencing, because they don't get it. They're like, you're crazy, just relax. And we're like, no, we're all in. We love what we do. We are not workaholics. We just truly love what we're doing. And the ability to speak with people and be around people who understand that. So you're not a freak, you're not abnormal, there's nothing wrong with you. Those conversations are so enriching and powerful for women.
I find that an entrepreneur's mindset, for those who do decide to stay the course, there is this element of risk and there's this excitement. And you can't talk to, you call them civilians, non-entrepreneurs about that for more than 5 minutes. Because once you do that, they've zoned out. They're just, waiting for an opportunity to talk about anything else. And yet when you're with entrepreneurs, there's this kinship, there's this understanding that you can dive into the knee-deep aspects of it and talk to other entrepreneurs about that.
Yeah.
Because frankly, it's like me listening to somebody who wants to talk about World War II, military details. No offense, guys, but we all have our passions, and entrepreneurs really can talk about business or want to talk and learn about business.
Yeah.
And so women need to do that. Women need to step up to that. And some men, sometimes I talk to these guys and they're all over the map too. They've got these grandiose ideas, and then it's the devil's in the detail. So a strong person will kind of still be visionary, but be able to take that vision and make it happen. Some of us are visionaries and some of us are doers. And a great entrepreneur is somebody who has the vision that can make that a reality or develop a team to help make that a reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us about a couple of your, you went from this first entrepreneurship to this consulting business, and you've morphed again. You've morphed a couple of times. Tell us about some of those successes and some of the struggles. What made you decide to change at that time? So let's take it from this current consulting business that you're talking about and take us further in your journey.
Yeah. So basically, I started my coaching business, and my niche at the time was women in leadership. And so I was really working to develop leadership capability in women who were running their own companies and women who were working inside the corporate world, nonprofit, all of that. And that really came from my specialty as a communications consultant, which was all in the field of presence, right? And so how presence shows up, in women leaders. And so this was really the area. And when I started in that niche, it was fairly wide open. There were not a lot of people in that space. And so it was a good niche. It worked. And then ultimately I found to do the type of work that I wanted to do, to get the kind of results that I wanted to get, it was a lot of work targeting 2 different audiences, right? And I was no longer interested in doing that. And so I started noticing this in 2016, 2017. So I was still serving both audiences. And so in 2018, I made that first shift, which was, we're just focusing exclusively on women entrepreneurs. And that was when, something kind of remarkable happened. So I wrote a blog about this recently. So in 2018, my calendar had 29 scheduled hours a week. 75% of my time was scheduled. And there was something, and this now I make a lot more money and we have a lot stronger profits, and I have 9 scheduled hours. So 1/4 of my time is scheduled. Now that the other 3/4 of my time doesn't mean I'm not doing anything. I am, but it's not scheduled. It's not sort of in delivery. Right. And so that was a big shift. And so I saw where it was going, and I saw the amount of scheduled time and what was required to build up these 2. So shift number 1 happens around that time when I decide I'm going to focus exclusively on working with women entrepreneurs. Now, at that time, my company was really built around a personal brand. And I think that's where a lot of people start. So my company was very much built around a personal brand. And I knew that I was going to grow beyond that as well. And that it really was going to be not just me, but we, that in order to fulfill my mission, it was about bringing together something that was bigger than me and kind of standing for that and all of that. So I decided so at that time, the next shift, and that really happened in 2020, when we decided to do a rebrand of the company from, our name was actually Eleanor Beaton and Company Communications, to SafiMedia, right? And so that was kind of the next shift that happened. And I think every single shift was about, and I can't emphasize this enough, every single shift was about refining the focus, focusing to amplify, and so those, I would say those were sort of the kind of two primary shifts. And when I made that first shift, let's say like niching down to just work with women entrepreneurs, that was really hard because it was hard and it was easy. Technically, it was very easy. I just stopped. Talking to women in corporate. That was it. We just stopped. I cut the programs. I mean, I cut like half my audience, and I cut a revenue stream that was about 35%, right? So it was not insignificant, but I did it because I had this vision and I knew it was the right thing to do and that I was going to make it work. But for me, the hardest part was I felt guilty and I felt that I was letting them down. I worried about disappointing people. This was some of that sort of people pleasing that was still there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now I just refer them. I refer like 3 or 4 people a week.
Did you transition? I know you stopped, but did you transition those that were still part of your program for the corporate women?
No, I just wrapped up all of my contracts.
Okay.
I stopped taking on any new. So the first transition, number 1, was I just stopped speaking to them in marketing.
Okay. Yep.
Transition number 2 was I figured out who is in this group, what programs are we going where we still have this, completed all of those.
Yeah.
Transition number 3 was, this is the hard part, saying no to a lot of money. Yeah, right. And so saying no to the contracts, saying no to could you just do this? Are you sure? So it was all the no's.
And I think that the revenue part is the hard part for people who are entrepreneurs to say no to. Like, why would I say no to that? And yet I know when I'm coaching and mentoring women entrepreneurs, because I was part of Grow Your Biz at one point, that some of them have that difficulty. I had one person who came in every month and she had a new venture because she talked to somebody and now she's working on that venture. And I'm going, wow, you need to, what is your business? Because I don't know anymore. I don't know what your business is because, after 5 months, it's totally different than it was in month 1. And every month was a different version of that. Now, at some point you started to have staff.
Mm-hmm.
And can you kind of share with our listeners,
mm-hmm.
what did that evolution, because that's a major hiccup in itself. Having staff is a big, it can be rewarding, but can also be a headache. And I know a lot of my clients will say, I can't sleep at night because I have to talk to somebody about a performance issue or whatever. So talk about that side of your growth. People side.
So I had been working with contractors and subcontractors for years and years and years. And that was sort of the way that I wanted to have it. And I think I got my first full-time employee in 2016. So 2016, that's when I started hiring people and building the team and growing through team members. And so it was sort of, and this is interesting. I believe that the most important thing is there's a values and energetic alignment,
Mm-hmm,
and I always thought values, but energy, sort of that energetic alignment. And so I was really lucky, especially in the beginning, that it was easy because when you're small and you only have a very few people, it's extremely organic. You are that part of your evolution as a company is you're all just kind of working on everything together. It's a very fun, cool, kind of experience. And so at that time, I was also hiring people who wanted to be in that kind of environment and do everything together, And so that was really, really effective. Then what starts to happen is you start to grow and your company starts to need different skill sets and you start to need different people. And sometimes some of those people can come with you and some of them can't always. And so I think that was probably one of the biggest things, growing the company. And as the company starts to grow and develop and where we're going and the skill sets that we need to accomplish that, really taking a look, do I have what I need? Is this something I can train for? Is it not? Really kind of getting optimized around those things. So here, I'll share my 3 sort of lessons. So first, this is huge for anybody, especially if you are in the transformative space. So the thing that makes you great at what you do is you can see the best in everybody. That can be really great for developing people. It cannot be great when you're choosing people, because any little red flags, what I have really seen is that things that present as just kind of little red flags, you're aware of them, but you think, oh, it's fine because everything else works. Now I'm like, if it's a red flag, no. You know what I mean? So my whole thing where I'm like, oh, I see the best in people, you know what I mean? Which really works in a coaching relationship, in a recruitment relationship does not, And so I think it's about, and you've talked about this before, Hilda, and I've heard you talk about this, but it's this instinct, it's this gut feel that you can only develop through experience, through the experience of hiring people, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. Yeah. And so I think that, that's been one of my biggest kind of evolutions is in terms of having stronger pre-boundaries and being more skeptical at the outset is very helpful.
Yeah. I when I teach about, hiring H101, I know that people don't have that experience that I have. So I can tell when my gut says something, I know from experience why it's saying that, or I think I know.
That's right.
And what I teach the novices,
why you have to listen to it.
And then I teach the novices, okay, so you don't have the experience. If your gut's saying something, just don't question it. It's saying something. You'll figure it out later. But if you hire that person, you'll probably figure it out later. But if you just continue hiring, you'll figure out why your gut was telling you things before. Because as you gain more experience, you'll know why your gut was saying something.
Yes.
That's my little words of wisdom for the uninitiated to HR. Right? Trust
but I think what's unusual, and I think what's unique about you is that, so, I have my red flag carriers on my team, and they're the ones, they're like a little bit more professional warriors. And I have really learned to listen when they are like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's not my tendency. I never want it to be, Now I know, you need to step into a different version of who you are just for a little bit here. Yeah. And you need to listen. What I find so cool about you is that a lot of the professional red flag people, they don't have your your warmth. They don't have, I think you naturally see the best in people, but have developed this ability to naturally also listen to those red flags. That's what I think is so cool and unique and unusual about you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But, I admire when you said earlier, when you were shifting your focus, you knew that some people didn't belong to that new focus. Yeah. And it's tough as an entrepreneur to do something about that. Because, I talked to some people and they, somebody said, it wasn't going along. And that person kept that person for 3 more years. And then the person finally resigned and gave 2 weeks notice. So that person had the courage to separate from you. Oh my gosh. You as an entrepreneur need to gain the comfort and the confidence to have that discussion, but to do it in a respectful way so that it gets easier. The more you practice it and you do it in a respectful way, then you'll say, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then you'll get stronger and stronger. It was funny at our company because they used to say, so Hilda, you do it. Let Mikey do it, that kind of thing, you do it. So I always became the closer. So So I had to learn how to do it with warmth. And
That's right.
so thank you for that compliment. Where are you now? Because I think you've just done another scale with SafiMedia. Tell us a little bit about that latest, leap into the newer focused version of SafiMedia rather than Eleanor Beaton Company.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this stage, and to me, this is like, there's so much really cool, fascinating stuff that I'm learning about the transition from having your business built around a personal brand to having it be built around something more than that. So I would say this is interesting. So in 2020, my commitment was only assets, only scalable assets, which meant that to get where I got, it was a lot of work and, all of that kind of stuff, but I experimented with different things, tried different things, and I developed this sense of I know exactly what the types of things that work for us. I'm always going to be willing to experiment, but I know my stuff, like I know how to do this. And I'm very clear that my focus is on making sure that our company grows through assets, not through hustle. So anything that requires my individual hustle that can't be repurposed or built upon, I'm not going to do it. And that was, to be humble but not modest, an act of tremendous discipline and focus that I don't see very much. And I'm just going to own it because I was like, yeah, this is how we're doing it. So all last year, all 2020, and COVID happens in the midst of this, but it was so powerful because my focus was internal. And it was really about making sure that all of our assets are in place, that this is capable of growth and scale without me. And that takes a lot. And I think that very few entrepreneurs get past that phase because it's very tricky. You have to navigate it. There's all kinds of different challenges that come up that you have to be humble. You have to be patient. You have to try a few things, and that's hard when you're already successful. Like when you have nothing to lose, it's easy. To me, it's when people do have a lot to lose and they continue to dig deep. That's what's that's what's like cool for me. So a lot of that foundation was laid in 2020. And so in 2021, it's about continuing to amplify, right? So we're moving into doing a lot of sort of research, in our particular area. We're not launching anything new. It's about amplifying, amplifying what we have and continuing to do really good work in that area.
So when you say assets, just for others, what does that mean? What are assets?
Yeah. So let me give you an example from our company. Our company, we have 2 core programs. And so we only sell 2 things. You can only buy 2 things. So do you want something customized? I love you. No, you know what I mean? So we have 2 core programs that we offer. And so those in themselves are assets, but there's 2 things around them. There's the actual intellectual property. Mm-hmm. There's the sort of train the trainer stuff that we have inside our company. There is the systems, that are set up to and systems and processes in order to deliver that. So that would be like asset number 1. And to get that refined, this is why I'm like, guys, do less, because to get it to a place where you can do this with excellence and serve a lot of people through it is challenging, right? And so that's what I mean by that's sort of asset number 1. But that's just part of it. Now it's what is the selling system associated with that particular offering. And that becomes an asset. If it's being done differently every time, if there's not consistency, if you don't have the correct resources to help your customers or clients make a good decision, an empowered decision. So that's another asset, your selling system. And then it's your marketing system. And what does that look like? And what does good marketing content look like? And how are other people, how can other people do that repeatably for you? So that would be another example of an asset. Okay. That's what I mean. Yeah.
So here's Eleanor, who grew up, who felt a sense, who had learned some really important lessons through her parents.
Yes.
Started her WWC company.
Yes.
And more of a solopreneur, and has transitioned now to the CEO that's telling us about assets.
Mm-hmm.
where are you at? Like, what sense of, what are your feelings right now of this journey that you have had? And what advice might you give to some entrepreneurs who are going through their own journeys?
So I think that, because for me, and this is so key in terms of the work that I do as well, it's like the business that I've built and it's who I've become, and those are the two things that are. So the business that I've built I love it. You know what I mean? So what I mean by that in terms of where I am, I really wanted to prove the point. I wanted to prove the point that you can generate great revenue and great profit, even more importantly, and you can do it with a tremendous amount of focus. And so that's where we are, in terms of the work. We continue to grow. Everything slows down, meaning that, what used to get results that used to, we'd have to hustle. We just don't do that anymore. And that's kind of that focus, right? So I would say that in terms of where I'm at, as a company, it's just this place of, real comfort where we are and poised for growth. To me, it's got to be fun. It has to be lucrative, and we're not going to rush to do it. So those three things. As a person, I would say that the biggest transformation has been, and I'm going to speak to your women entrepreneurs right now. If you're a woman and you are doing transformative work, in order to be the type of woman who is capable of leading groups of women, of supporting them through their transformation, you need to live it to give it. You need to be that leader who is capable of receiving the money and who is capable of delivering the impact without having to control everything. And that to me that's the path. That is the path that I'm on. And that's what's most important to me. And it really comes down to 3 words. We talked about them earlier. I am enough. So I don't have to overfunction. I am enough as a woman right now to do this thing that I want to do. And I'm sharing that for every woman who's listening here. You don't have to overfunction. You don't have to accomplish this in order to be worthy to be able to do it. You're there right now. That kind of energy is going to lead you to put your attention on the wrong things. So I hope that's a helpful answer.
I think so. I think those are powerful words. And it's just resonating with, we are nurturers, we are giver. Again, we are speaking to the women because this is a woman authority in terms of boosting people's confidence. I really feel that we as women need to gain confidence in ourselves, believe in ourselves, right? And I just love what you shared. Eleanor, I'm so glad that you joined us. Can you tell us how to get a hold of you? What's the best way for us to connect?
Absolutely. So if you love this podcast, and such a fantastic interview, by the way, if you love this podcast, then check out the Power Presence Position podcast, which is my show. And you can find me still at eleanorbeaton.com.
So thank you, Eleanor, for taking time from your relaxed schedule, but to fit me into that relaxed schedule and share your words of wisdom, share your journey. I've always found you to be honest and to share not just the successes, but the lessons learned. So we can learn from your lessons learned. Yes. So thank you very much for being part of our show today.
Thank you, my friend. This was an honor.